Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Only Stupid Answers. Today we are talking about Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 2, titled Whitey's on the Moon. And today, as always, I have a very amazing guest. Say hi to the kids at home.
Hello. I'm Jeannine Brice. People might know me as Jeannine the Machine
Great
on the
name.
Movie Trivia Schmodown. I also host a podcast called It's a Wonderful Podcast. I have a whole podcast feed with 3 shows where we talk about movies and Schmodown and all kinds of fun stuff. So you may know me from that.
That's awesome. So on your podcast, what are some of the movies you've discussed recently?
So we recently actually discussed a Lovecraftian style movie.
Hell yeah.
We talked about The Haunted Palace, the Vincent Price movie. Every Wednesday we have a show called Morgan Hasn't Seen, where I force my co-host Morgan to watch movies he hasn't seen. But
Love
because
it.
It's my birthday month, we've swapped it. So now he's sharing movies with me that I haven't seen. So it was my first time watching The Haunted Palace. And yes, I was definitely like, this is perfect, like this show, and just seeing that movie. It's pretty.
It feels
fitting.
like it feels like really perfect symmetry, considering like last week's episode was more related to road stories and road movies and stuff like that. This one definitely had like the Vincent Price haunted mansion Gothic horror vibe going on.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Well, like I said at the top, we were talking about Season 1, Episode 2, Whitey's on the Moon. The synopsis is as follows. Inexplicably recovered from their terrifying night, Leti and George luxuriate in their new surroundings, while Atticus grows suspicious of their Ardham Lodge hosts. Christina Braithwhite, played by Abbey Lee, and her elusive father Samuel, played by Tony Goldwyn, who unveil cryptic plans for Atticus's role in their upcoming Sons of Adam ceremony. Later, after Tick, Leti, and George stumble upon a clue that could lead them to Montrose, each takes an unwelcome walk down memory lane. This episode was directed by Daniel Sackheim. It was written by Misha Green, who also developed the show based off the novel by Matt Ruff. So, Jeannine, before we really get into it, so we're 2 episodes in, so we're not very far, but so far, what are your thoughts on the show?
Really enjoying it. I've actually been delving lately too in my podcast talking about Blacks and horror and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, usually with that, them being Black doesn't really have to play into the plot, but there's always a trope with that. But I really liked this kind of spin where, a topic, an experience that is inherently Black and deals with Black culture is the backdrop for these kind of crazy supernatural things. I think that's really smart because it's an added, element that our protagonists have to fight through along with all these crazy things. So I think that's really cool.
So in this episode, we begin with the song "Moving On Up," and George and Leti are enjoying themselves in this mansion. They call it a lodge. It's a castle essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, they are living the high life in this place.
Definitely.
And we never completely nailed down why Atticus is not affected, but I would assume it's because of the lineage that we've been hinting at.
He's more grounded in everything that's going on.
Yeah. The costuming in the show is of course amazing. But one small detail, because I'm a superhero nerd, and I like this stuff. Atticus is wearing a yellow shirt, and because of how super heroic his physique is, and the yellow shirt, it immediately made me think of the classic design for Luke Cage.
Luke Cage, yeah, I got those vibes too.
Yeah, sure. And it was cool because he is our hero, and kind of in placing him in more of that, and we get a couple scenes where we get to see Atticus's physique, Jonathan Major's physique.
Yes.
And he's doing all right for himself. I think it's fair to say. He definitely fills the super heroic role there.
Yes.
So I don't know if it was intentional or not. And of course, not to get too far ahead, but Montrose is also wearing a yellow shirt. So there's some symmetry there as well. What did you think about the use of the Moving On Up song with this opening scene and the fact that George and Leti don't seem to remember what happened the night before?
I think it's a great illustration of them kind of in a dream-like daze. Like everything kind of ended so intensely at the end. So then to kind of open on this kind of comedic fun beat was a nice breather before we got into more kind of serious fare later in the episode. Yeah. So I really liked the opening. I thought it was really funny. And then when you kind of see that plays into kind of dreamlike haze that they're in, I think it worked perfectly.
So, of course, we meet William, Jordan Patrick Smith, who is not, despite all appearances, the sibling of Christina Braithwhite, played by Abbey Lee, who people may recognize from Mad Max Fury Road. She was also Neon Demon, even though they look exactly the same. It's a small village. I imagine there's not a lot of getting around. I got the impression that everybody's related to everybody there, but we don't need to dive into all that.
Village of the Damned kind of vibes.
100%. 100%. So he kind of introduces them to the manor and a little bit of the history, and this is where we first learn a little bit about Titus Braithwhite, who was notoriously kind to those who worked for him, which if there was ever like a loaded, like, hey, look out.
Yes.
Notorious and kind for those who worked for him. None of this is okay. And I like that our protagonist immediately, it's not like, oh, I wonder if this is, they're immediately
what that means.
No, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
What did you, you talked about a little bit about that Vincent Price movie you saw, definitely got like Village of the Damned, that haunted mansion, Gothic horror vibe. What were your feelings in those early scenes where we kind of got to see the house in the village?
Oh, definitely. Like the creepy old kind of groundskeeper, like, we've been expecting you. Like very kind of haunted mansion vibes for sure. I think that definitely plays up to them having, Atticus having those fears, like, I don't trust this place. So I like that he was able to kind of pick up on those kind of spooky vibes. I thought that was really good.
Absolutely. And we get, they talk a little bit about the Silver Bentley before. We got a little static last episode. I called the Silver Bentley futuristic, and people were like, well, it's an old car. And I know it's an old car, but the specific choice of that car and the silver, I thought evoked, spaceship designs and stuff like that from the era.
Futuristic.
Exactly. And also it has a force field, which is not of the time. I'm not a car expert, but I'm pretty sure Bentleys in that area didn't have that.
Yeah.
They go into the village and they meet Dell, who's played by Jamie Newman, who's from The Deuce and Jessica Jones. And she's, from more modern movies, she reminded me of the people in Django Unchained with the dogs, and of course, dogs have a very specific place in American history when it comes to racism and slavery and all that, which I thought was also interesting that they evoked that with the show is not giving them a name, but it seems Atticus' description in the last episode seems to fit Shoggoth, those creatures of the eyeball beings that rip people apart, and I think it seems very purposeful to me that it's a dog whistle that pulls them off.
That calls them back,
Exactly. And we get to see that tower that's a meat locker, and they immediately assume that Montrose is buried there. What did you think about, what was she? What was Dell? I guess she wasn't law enforcement. They call her the sheriff, but she's not really.
No, but she's kind of an authority figure, thinking she can kind of like tell people what to do. And she's obviously kind of in charge of this building where they, keep people or keep something. So I can understand them getting that sense from her, and also hearing the whistle that she holds, kind of controlling something so kind of deadly. I was really trying to feel her out, what her vibe was. She was just kind of weird, and of course, that stereotypical kind of crazy racist. So was definitely trying to feel her out and like what she was hiding.
Absolutely. And it is talking about kind of the stereotypical aspect of it. This episode did a very good job of evoking classic genre movies and stuff to the point where I think it picked up some of that genre's bad habits of everything's kind of on the note, like everything is what it is, and a little bit obvious and a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? Unsubtle. Nothing about the episode is particularly subtle, which isn't a problem, but I think you and I were talking a little bit before we got on the air that we might have preferred the first episode to this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Like the first episode, I definitely felt like there was a better balance of kind of real world issues playing into them also having to deal with these kinds of higher level conspiracies going on. Whereas here we got like that, and it maybe took away from what the things that I liked about the first episode. It took away from the kind of it didn't balance the real world elements as well with the more supernatural stuff that they were starting to kind of build on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as they're coming back, they're going back to the manor. They are attacked once again by the Shoggoth, and it's called off by main Lady Braithwhite. Christina Braithwhite,
Yeah.
excuse me, I keep wanting to say Braithwaite. It's Braithwhite. They say it a bunch of times. It's very clearly Braithwhite. And once again, Leti and Uncle George don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when we first meet Christina's dad, Samuel, played by Tony Goldwyn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who's a real creep, like right off the bat. Makes it very clear that, but what's interesting is right off the top, it's clear that there's some tension between Christina and her father. He brings up that painting of Genesis 2:19, and his description of it is unsettling, is a way to describe it. It definitely lets you know, like, oh, this guy's not fun to hang with. Like this, we don't.
No, and then the fact that it's all Eve, like kind of his daughter, it's all female is the problem.
Yeah.
Kind of, rhetoric that he was kind of building up with his whole explanation,
which kind of establishes the tension between him and Christina. And then Christina talks to Atticus saying she wants to be a friend. I don't know about you. I don't trust her.
No, there's definitely some jealousy there. Like I wanted to believe that, but of course, when we got closer to kind of the end, you saw that there was going to be some kind of jealousy vibes happening and her kind of talking about, if you want something, you have to take it. And, her kind of whole mentality on things definitely has me like side-eyeing her for sure.
Yeah, and especially since, again, not to get too far ahead, it doesn't look like Samuel's going to factor much into later episodes.
No.
So if somebody's being set up to be more of the big bad of the season, it seems to be Christina. And I honestly hope they stick with that, because as a fan of genre fiction, there's a trope, especially, the stuff I was growing up with, stuff targeted at young men, where you'll have a villain that's like the hot femme fatale, and the creators just can't help it themselves but like make them good by the end, I guess because they're too hot to be bad. I don't know.
Right.
And so I kind of don't want them to fall into this trap as well. As like, no, just you can let her be bad. It's okay.
Just keep her that way.
Yeah, just keep her bad.
It works.
And of course, Atticus wants a gesture, some proof that she might be friendly, and so she lets Leti and Uncle George remember, and it's not great for them remembering the events of the evening before. What do you think? We don't get a lot in this episode kind of articulating the magic in this world. There's a little bit of talk about specifically language, and they relate the book that they're using to the Necronomicon, but it's the opposite of that. And there's a language of
life.
The language of Adam and all that. What were your thoughts on the Sons of Adam's magic and how it related to these characters and this essentially trap that they're in?
I don't think I needed too much of an explanation because it was all very visual stuff. So I think I kind of got the hang of what the magic was able to do. But it was clear, it kind of showed their motives, like their magic was used mostly for manipulation and really nothing more than that. So I think it illustrated what they can do while also like showing who they are and like what their motives are. Because I don't think they really used it in too much positive sense. They used it more to manipulate and control. So I think that kind of sets you up for Atticus's fears of what these people are all about.
If there was one scene that really hinted at the fact that you shouldn't trust Christina, it's that right after that she goes to a cow that looks to be a cow birth. It is not. I guess the Shoggoth incubate in the cows. And
in a cow.
I thought that was a really effective scene. And again, kind of complicates your perspective of her because the act of what's going on is inherently motherly and kind of loving. But it is a monster that eats people.
And like the fact that they had to throw in there that was her first time, like helping with a birth of one of these things. So it kind of gives you that hint, like you were talking about, that maybe she will be kind of a big bad in the future. Like there's more to come from her. This is her first time. She's just getting started. So I feel like that's what they were trying to tell us with that.
And there's also an interesting line. I can't remember quite where it falls in the episode. I think it's right before this, because there's some hints, they talk about the butler, and there's very specifically a line that, my dad would not associate with the clan. They're too poor.
Oh, wow.
And it references, not only does it firmly establish the Sons of Adam as like way on the b-hole side of cults, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But it is also an interesting little nod to the idea of just because just the exploitation of labor, and even though groups like this are most antagonistic to people of color, it's not like they're doing people that look the same as them any real favors.
No.
Even that in and of itself is kind of an illusion and a manipulation.
Yeah. Yes.
So that was a smart little contextualization of things. So at that point in the manner, our characters start having visions. We don't know it's a vision at first, or at least I didn't. When Atticus and Letty start getting hot and heavy,
Letty.
I'm like, this is two beautiful people.
We were hoping this was going to happen. Yeah,
exactly.
Like these people. Yeah,
a little sooner than expected. You know, do the will they, won't they a little bit, but I'm all for it. Let's go for it. And then they cut to across the room, and Atticus is still in his room. It's communicating with George in Morse code, which I thought was a neat touch. And I immediately got worried. I'm like, I don't know how far they're going to go with this Letty thing. You got to be careful. This could get gross real quick. This could get kind of not fun, kind of creepy. And they both have. It seemed that all the visions kind of related to romantic partners, because Letty is seeing Atticus and kind of envisioning them being romantic. Atticus is seeing Gia, played by Jamie Chung, who we've gotten hints at being from his time
of who she is.
Yeah. I didn't expect her to be a soldier. That took me off guard.
But coming out guns blazing. Yeah.
And it was a cool action sequence too.
Yeah.
And then George is seeing Dora, who was mentioned earlier as Atticus's mother. And that's when they're out in the field, they get their first hint of like, maybe there's something going on with George and Atticus' mom, because he knows stuff he shouldn't know. And she's played by Erica Tazel, who people may know as Rachel Brooks from Justified, which is a show I love. So it was great seeing her again. What did you think about specifically what's going on with George and Dora and Atticus' mom?
I liked those hints of that. It was a little bit of, intrigue, because, they've kind of set up George to be kind of this moral center. And so for him to kind of have a little bit of scandal happening, was interesting. And also that he was kind of the first one to really not want to play into it.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely something that, you could see maybe he felt guilt about, because he didn't want to believe it was true. And he was the first to kind of break away from it. So I thought that was really interesting. And just another layer to his character as kind of the moral center, having a little bit of scandal going on in his past.
Absolutely. And as far as Atticus and Gia, what do you think? Because he called somebody on the phone. I assumed that was Gia. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. But when Atticus comes out, he said something very bad happened. And so now I'm wondering about whether she's still alive or not. Like, do you think she's alive? Do you think it's a romantic thing, or it might be something different than that?
Well, I mean, even his whole fantasy thing in the first episode, like, she was a part of that.
Yeah.
And this kind of otherworldly vision he had of her. So I don't know, like, he called somebody. So I'm like, who did he talk to? If she's not alive, then it can't be her, but is he just imagining her in a different way? I couldn't really figure out what was the deal with her yet. So.
Yeah, and it couldn't be like a secret love child, because I don't think enough time has passed from the Korean War to have her sound like an adult. Like,
and for him to have such a violent, image, an interaction with that fantasy version of her, really has me curious of like what really went down.
Right after that, when they kind of break out of their visions, Letty's vision is Atticus has a snake.
Snake in his pants.
Yeah, snake in his pants, and she's able to fend that off.
Snake in my pants. Yeah.
But it leads to one of my favorite scenes in the episode where George. This is why you hire Courtney B. Vance, is for like scenes like this where he gives them like an affirmation that was really. I'm going to miss him on the show. Where he like gives them an affirmation. It was really lovely. What do you think of the dynamic of this kind of like makeshift family before? Again, spoilers before there isn't much of one.
Yeah. I think it was a really great character builder because I mean this is only the second episode and you're already so invested in this character so that when we lose him, like, it means more.
Yeah.
I just really loved that moment. Atticus is feeling guilty about things that he did in his past and he stops him and tells him, you were always a good boy and you are an even better man.
Yeah.
And he takes both of their hands and they just kind of like hold each other for a minute, and it was just such a beautiful moment that they've created this kind of core family unit with all this craziness, and it's kind of them against the world. I just loved that whole vibe of that moment.
Atticus and George are invited to the Sons of Adam's dinner. Not incredibly welcome there. Surprise.
Yes.
And we find out that when George was going around reading books, he found kind of their history. We find out that he was part of the Prince Hall Freemasons. Get a nice little history of that, and the fact that Atticus, this is something maybe you could help me with. It confused me a little bit. They say Atticus is like the last true blood heir of Titus Braithwaite, but isn't also Samuel Braithwhite? I keep messing up. Braithwhite isn't also Samuel a Braithwhite, and Christina's also a Braithwhite. So are they maybe like great nephews or nieces?
I would think so, but I think the whole thing just with Christina is because she's female, so she is not eligible to even be a part of that. But I guess he's just the most pure one. Like, I was a little bit confused about that too.
Yeah, maybe we'll, not that we necessarily need it, but maybe we'll get a little bit more of an explanation of that later on. Also, I'm kind of glad we got I've gotten to a point, any type of genre show where they're like, you've got a secret lineage. I'm like, just let the person be a dude. Like, just let them, you know what I mean? Like, let what they do define what they're doing.
Yes.
So I'm kind of glad that we got it out of the way, and it's not really that like,
builds up to this big lineage thing.
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna inherit Camelot or something. It's like, actually, you're the great grandkid of a not good dude, and the only reason that these people care about you is for not good reasons. So let's just move on.
Yes.
So they decide to. He basically orders everybody out, and they go to free Montrose, who is in a. They specifically reference the Count of Monte Cristo, famously written by Alexander Dumas. And Montrose has mounted his own escape, and I really like the first scene with Michael Kenneth Williams where he's like, "Why'd you come?"
Yeah,
I didn't want you to come. What did you think?
I can save myself. I don't need you.
I did save myself. What did you think about Michael Kenneth Williams' entrance into the series?
Because I mean, there was all this buildup of like, we have to find him. He wrote me this letter. He needs my help. He needs me. And then as soon as they like you finally get to the thing that you're trying to do this whole show so far, and he's just like, what are you doing here? Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, damn it. Like, we've been through hell and back for you. And what the hell?
And also, like, I like that we've had hints that, Atticus' upbringing wasn't the best. Montrose and George's, upbringing wasn't the best. And so I like when we find Montrose is like, he's a bit of an ass. But like in an entertaining way. Like, again, it's Michael Kenneth Williams. So every time there's just a sense of endearment that it's like, God bless you for being on my TV again. But I like that kind of antagonism, and they go to escape. And in something that, we all probably should have realized ahead of time is that, these people have force fields. And the car hits the force field on their way out.
Yeah. Oh, that looked so cool.
Also, never trust those little like covered bridges. Nothing ever good happens.
Right.
If you're in a horror movie. If you're in a horror movie and there's that covered bridge, nothing good's going to happen on it.
Yeah. You're in a Back to the Future movie.
Exactly. Nothing good happens there. They hit the force field, and then Samuel shows up and shoots Leti, which they did a pretty good job selling that, like, she died.
Yeah.
And then he shoots George, and he uses that as leverage to get Atticus to do this ritual, which we find out is supposed to, I guess, open a gate to Eden, and then Samuel's going to go through, and he's going to be immortal or some dumb stuff like that. Some villain stuff. Something, if the villain had any sense in his head, he's like, but this probably isn't going to work out. Were you worried when Leti got shot? You're like, are they really doing this?
Yes, I was freaking out. I'm like, this has to be some of their like BS magic. Like, no, like, she's like the star of this show. She's like the woman in the crew. You can't, no. Like I was freaking out a little bit because it was pretty real. But I'm like, it has to be some of their like messed up magic. It's got to be some of this messed up magic. Like it can't be real. Yeah,
she's Black Canary. You can't get rid of Black Canary
Right?
this early on. I was also worried, and then I became worried once she was healed. I kind of became worried that it's like you can't really introduce bringing people back from the dead. It lowers the stakes.
A little bit problematic. Yeah,
that ends up not being a problem. They establish their stakes later on, and as they set up Atticus to do the ritual, which if Samuel's planning on going back to Eden, it's like a spoiler alert. Based on where people, if Eden was real, based on where they think it is, they're probably going to look more like Atticus than they are you. Just heads up.
Warning.
Just so you know, I guess. We get a scene between Montrose and George, which I thought was, especially now in hindsight, realizing it's the only scene we're going to get of them together.
Yeah.
They did a really good job selling the history between the two characters.
Yeah. And telling him that, you need to know this because soon you're probably going to be all he has.
Yeah.
So I like that they definitely had that moment for sure.
And it is kind of a good parting shot because obviously George is kind of more the person you'd want to have with you.
Yes.
So it's interesting that Atticus gets stuck with the guy that's
drunk and abandoned you and all kinds of like issues and drama. Yeah.
Well, and I like when George asked Montrose about his drawing, and he's like, "I never drew anything," and talking about how much love he had and how he didn't realize how much abuse Montrose endured. And we got a little bit of that in the last episode too. This idea of like legacy of abuse.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about what the groundwork the show's kind of laying with that theme?
I think it's really well done. Just, George feeling that guilt about not stepping up and protecting him more. But then he's still kind of so he's trying to redeem it in helping and go finding him and helping take care of Atticus. So I think he's been trying to make up for that like his whole life. So I like that they laid that work that, he does really feel bad for those things and he wants to do right by his brother. He wants to do right by Atticus. So I think once they came together and had these final talks, I think it definitely meant more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just bummed. That's it. That's all we're going to get. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm already dwelling. I'm not going to dwell on it. So then we go to the ritual. And just like last week where they played kind of a iconic speech during one of the scenes, we get a song, Whitey's on the Moon by Gil Scott-Heron, which was also pretty effectively, more recently effectively used in First Man, if anybody saw that movie. And I sometimes... I kind of have mixed feelings about the way like the anachronistic music is used on the show. But I thought that was a really I find that song very meaningful, and very impactful, especially in the context of what we're seeing in this show. Yeah. And so I thought I thought it was very effective and also elevates what would just kind of be your normal. It's essentially a version of like Bond's tied to the table with the laser beam going to his crotch. Like that's that's essentially what this type of scene is.
This is happening. Yeah,
and the song kind of elevates it. And my interpretation of who Atticus sees is his ancestor, who was, I guess, for lack of a better word, was knocked up by Titus.
Yes, the kindness that he shows to his servants.
So right. Oh my God. So that probably. Oh, and then other movie references. Then essentially, I in my notes I put down Raiders moment where the energy goes out and everybody's either dusted or turned to stone.
Oh, stone. Yeah.
So obviously this wasn't the intent. What do you think kind of like happened here, and why do you think Atticus was seeing his great grandma?
I think maybe there's another layer that, he has more power than they expected him to have, that maybe his lineage is more meaningful and pure than they expected it to be. I know Samuel was kind of pushing this whole thing, just because you're useful, doesn't mean you're not like expendable. But maybe there is more to that than he even realized, I think playing that, song and during that part, I think I saw that as kind of, the most supernatural thing in our world is like going to the moon.
Yeah.
And, that can happen, but Atticus is still going to be seen. He can deal with all these supernatural things, but he's still going to be seen in this world as less than and have to deal with all the things that he has to deal with. So I think that's what I was playing into that. And so I think that's how Samuel saw him too. While he does have a use for him, he didn't see him to be maybe more than what he expected him to be.
After this, the whole building collapses.
Yeah.
And that's where we find out George died, which of course you and I have been hinting at the entire episode. And one, do you think it's for keeps, or can we get him? It has to be for keeps. If we bring him back now, there's just no stakes in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I see maybe like some ghost version or like some magical like come to give you advice version maybe pops up here and there, because
I'll take ghosts.
They cannot do Courtney B. Vance like that. He is so excellent. The fact that he got us so invested in his character that we are like so heartbroken in 2 episodes, it's just a testament to how great he is. So like ghost Courtney B has to come back, or
I'll take ghosts.
just to impart some advice here and there or something. I'll take it.
Misha Green, if you're hearing us, ghosts. just want to throw that out there. I'm sure this series is well shot, long shot, a long time ago. But just throwing it out there. Maybe you can CGI a Courtney B. Vance ghost in there. So where do you think our characters go from here? Because the whole mission of what I thought was going to be the season-long arc was finding Montrose, and we found him. Do they just go back home? Like, what's our next step, you think?
I think maybe they try to go back home and try to go back to normal, but this whole situation and like his higher purpose is going to keep calling him. So I feel like they may just try to go back to normal and think that they're done with everything. But I think it's going to be something that's going to follow him, that they're going to have to continually have to deal with. Yeah. So I think it's going to send them back on the road or on another kind of adventure to figure all this out.
I do hope it does send them back on the road, because I really liked the road element of the first episode. Somebody in the comments who read the book suggested that that's not how the book goes, and that I would be disappointed. And at this point, I have not read the book. Have you read the book?
No.
Okay. So neither of us read the book. I don't know how much at this point the show is adhering to it. I'd be interested if you all have read the book in the comments. Please let us know how close we are to kind of what they've been doing, if they're doing their own thing, or if they're adhering fairly closely to the text. Before we wrap up, we have some questions from the Discord. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but Danny M says, "Is Uncle George really Papa George?" Because they imply that they talked about it before, and they weren't going to bring it up again.
Yeah.
Do you think that is the case, or do you think we're always going to keep it ambiguous?
I think at some point we'll find out, but I think for now they're going to keep it ambiguous. I think he probably revealed that to his brother, and that'll come up at some point. But yeah, I don't think they're going to reveal that for a while.
Ethan Schaff says, will we see Tick dive more into his lineage or have some sort of magic to control, or do you think it's over now that we've left the mansion?
I don't think it's over. I think we're definitely going to be dealing with more magic for sure.
Ulysses Campbell talking about the magic a little bit. So the force field was caused by the sigils on the bridge, but also the car used a force field in the first episode. So how does it work? So this kind of goes back to our questions about what the nature of the magic is. And I think, like you said, we'll probably, since this probably isn't going away, we'll maybe get that unpacked more.
On how it works, because even on the doorways they had like the symbols and the force field was there, so it's not just the card that creates it, because they had it on the doors when like she wouldn't let them out of their rooms.
Remind the kids at home where they can find you, what you're doing, and what they should check out.
You can find me at Jeannine Dabine on Twitter and Instagram. You can check out the It's a Wonderful podcast feed, all places where podcasts are found, Apple, Google, Anchor. We have 3 shows over there. There's Machine Mondays, every Monday with me, where I talk all things Schmodown. We have Morgan Hasn't Seen every Wednesday, where I force my dear co-host Morgan to watch a franchise or a series of films he's missed. And every Friday is our main show, It's a Wonderful Podcast, where we give love to those old classic films.
I love it. Of course, you can find me at DJ Talks Trash. You can follow this show or our podcast at Only Stupid Answers. You're going to want to yank the vowels out of stupid on Twitter. Please please subscribe. if you want to watch discussions like this live or our podcast episodes live, you can do that at patreon.com/onlystupidanswers. That's where we get our questions from in the chat and also on the Discord. Jeannine, thank you so much for joining me. Please go follow her, listen to her podcast, all of that stuff, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.